Everybody's doing okay today. Looks like we've got some vacationers gone today. We hope they're on vacation and not sick, but we're glad everybody's here today that's here today. I'm going to go ahead and get started. This may take us a minute this morning, okay? I believe when we think about ourselves as human beings, one of the primary ways that we characterize ourselves is that as human beings, we're capable of various sensibilities, we're capable of various awarenesses, we're conscious of realities that we believe nothing else in the world is exactly conscious of, or sometimes we just put that all under the heading of saying that we are very, very capable of emotion. I even believe that on a good day that we would become convinced that emotions are more of a powerful reality of our lives than thinking even is. I kind of even believe that animals have emotions. I'm not sure if plants do. I don't talk to plants. Although sometimes when I pull up weeds and throw them over in the sun and they start to wilt, it's almost like something of them cries out, "Why did you pull me up from my rootedness?" When I watch the interactions between my wife and her cat, I'm sure that animals have emotion. They almost can talk to each other. That's the strangest thing to see. So I think that we are people that understand that we have emotions. The second thing I would kind of say as a prelude is that our emotions are very, very unique to all of us. I would admit to crying at movies and sometimes commercials on televisions. My wife thinks that is silly. Some people get thrilled at new ideas, and other people want no new ideas whatsoever. Some people love to go to new places, and other people are comforted by the familiar. And so all of us are different emotionally. And one of the things that I think that we learn early on is you should never, ever try to tell another person how to feel about something or what kind of emotions that they ought to experience about something. And so we are people that in our uniqueness are filled with all kinds of emotions. On the other hand, I think that there are some emotions that we kind of tend to hold in common, or that all of us experience to one degree or another, and sometimes even very intensely. I think all of us experience the joy of birth. And there's something about seeing a new baby that just fills us all in significant ways. Now, maybe you've all had all the babies you want to have, and so I'm not trying to give you any ideas, but on the other hand, when we have grandchildren and great-grandchildren come into the world and we're in close proximity to that happening, I think we all have the joy that comes with the hopefulness of new birth. I think that we can enjoy the emotion that we would caricature as the fun of children. Maybe it's something that we can remember from our own lives and the fun that we had playing as children. Or maybe it's something that we vicariously try to experience with watching our own children play their ball games and do their dance recitals and kick their soccer balls around and all of the things that we sometimes can do. We need to be careful that sometimes we live it vicariously. 3 weeks ago, I decided to show Charlie and Bradford that I too could navigate a tumble house. The result was not a broken back, but a detached retina, and it still is giving me problems. So that was fun, though, playing with them. I enjoyed the emotion of fun. I think that in common with all of us, we know what the feeling of impending danger is, and all of us have been in situations which, even before some dangerous reality presented itself, we kind of realized that we were in a dangerous situation. I think all of us, like bears in the woods, Susan, I think that all of us enjoy the success of winning. Like the old ABC sports show used to say, we know what the thrill of victory is like. Some of us lately have experienced too much of the agony of defeat, but don't we love it when our team wins? And then we all, I think, have something of the experience of the beauty and joy of love, of first love, and maybe first love repeated in different circumstances of life, or first love that remains meaningful over long periods of time. Have any of y'all ever been to Hackleburg, Alabama? That's about what I figured. Boyd Cobb has been to Hackleburg, Alabama. In 1967, a resident of Hackleburg, Alabama, became very, very, very famous. Do you know who that was? Oh, you do know who that was. It was a guy named Sonny James. You all remember Sonny James. You remember those words, first love, young love, held with such true devotion, first love, young love, with a purity of emotion. So I think we know exactly what that experience is like. And now you will remember from this lesson, Sonny James in Hackleburg, Alabama. However, I think there is a very, very special emotion that I wish was not a part of the picture, but that it is. I think we all have an experience of sometimes, and sometimes even live in a world that compounds that experience, that is as common to us as fear of something dangerous, as loving to see something beautiful. And that is our experience of homelessness. Our experience of homelessness. I hate to be away from home. It is unsettling. I get tired of airplanes that take me away from home. I would rather be home than almost any place. And so no matter how much you might be accepted by the people that you're with away from home, no matter how interesting the work could be as you are away from home, no matter what new places that you might see when you're away from home, I find that sense of homelessness to be almost haunting. Nothing makes me feel much better than when I finish that last assignment of the day and I know I'm on my way back toward the airport. I love that country song that has the lyric, everywhere I've ever been is on my way back home. And sometimes if it weren't for getting now off without having to walk down the stairs at the Chattanooga airport, I almost feel like the Pope sometimes. I want to get out and kind of kiss the ground. And so I think that homelessness is a really strong aspect of our lives. My friend Chuck Matherson returned from Vietnam for the first time, and he was so wounded that he was nearly dead, and they rushed him to Walter Reed Hospital in Washington. He was in a coma and nearly dead for a number of days, and finally he began to recover and come back to himself, and he said that when he woke up, that the first thing he saw coming through the door to his room was his mother. And Chuck Matherson said it this way, he said, home came through that door. And so that feeling of homelessness, especially having been injured and nearly killed in Vietnam, that feeling of homelessness was overwhelmed by the presence of his mother. Some of us have had that experience, I'm sure, many times. Unfortunately, he came back from Vietnam a second time, a man who was a celebrated hero, and as he walked across a bridge at the Seattle airport where his plane first landed in America, he was met by chants of baby killer and was actually spat upon. And he said, I felt homeless in this country that I had given my life to try to save. My poor stepmother had a father who never was successful in Tennessee. And so back in the early part of the 1900s, along with a lot of other people, he went to Oklahoma to find his kind of future out there and was involved in some of that land giveaway, and that was going to give him a new lease on life, and it ended up that his life got caught up in the Dust Bowl. And so he didn't experience home there, and he came back to Tennessee, and he was branded by some people in his family as a loser, and he for a number of years was never able to do anything successful. And so one day he walks out on, of all things, the Gay Street Bridge in Knoxville and jumps off and kills himself. The homelessness eradicated, any hopefulness in his life. And we know that his story is being replicated in our world today, especially in our country, where the number of suicides because of a deep feeling of a lack of place is haunting and destroying people's lives. And so I think we all know what homelessness feels like. There's probably no other group in the world, that's a group, that know this experience better than the Jewish people. Think about that for a minute. Think about the Jewish people and their sojourn in Egypt, where they were made slaves before the Exodus. Think about the Jewish people and the way they were ripped out of Jerusalem and Palestine and carried off into the horrors of Babylonian exile. Think about the Jewish people who were overwhelmed by Romans in the time of Jesus and who were cast out across Europe and Asia in a diaspora that caricatured their lives for literally centuries. Think about the Jewish people having to live through and deal with and experience the aftermath of the Holocaust. And so I doubt that there's any people in the world that know more about this emotion of homelessness than the Jewish people. It's no wonder at some of their most significant religious services that they end them by saying, next year in Jerusalem, it has connotations of home. It's no wonder that there's that famous verse from the book of Psalms that has these Jewish people crying out in Babylonian exile, how can we sing the songs of the Lord in a strange land? It's no wonder that even Paul in the New Testament says in some of his advice to people that he loved, if you're hungry, go home and eat. And I think he was talking about a hunger there that was more than physical hunger, and a hunger that can be satiated at home more than any kind of physical hunger. I think it's interesting that Paul says, in this bodily existence that we have, when we're not with the Lord, we're not at home. I think it's interesting that St. Augustine says, following that I will never feel at home until I am home with God. And you know, I think if we're honest about it, none of us are interested, I hope, in kind of advancing our home going. But I think sometimes if we're honest about it, we do have a place in our hearts where we can envy those people who have gone home, or envy those people who have had those meetings that we sometimes wonderfully think about when we see our mothers again, or we see our loved ones again, or when we're at home with the Lord. Sometimes homelessness, as Paul says, in this bodily existence almost forces us to think of a home beyond this bodily existence. Home sometimes is related to places. My wife has this theory that when the immigrants came from Europe, that they walked around and moved around and traveled around until they found a place that looked like home to them. Home is places. And so you've gone to Ireland and you've gone to Scotland, and then you go out around the countryside here that's so beautiful, and you understand why it's populated by so many people that are Scotch-Irish. They found a place that looked like home. I went to Loch Ness one time, and I talked to my son on the phone, and my son said, "What's Loch Ness like?" And I think he was really wanting to know what the monster that was in the water might have looked like. And my honest and totally honest response to him was, looks a lot like wolf teeth. I've been teased by that across the years, that I was in this exotic place. But what made it exotic was probably because it exactly looked like Wolf Teever, which I think is a pretty beautiful place. So home is so associated with place. And obviously home is associated with people. You know those words of that song, making your way in the world today takes everything you've got. Remember that? It's the lead-in to the TV series Cheers. And it ends up with how wonderful it is to be in a place where what? Everybody knows you. And even if it's Sam and Norm, who I loved, and Coach and Woody, and even on a good day, Fraser and Diane, to be in a place where everybody knows your name is a kind of a cheer-filled experience. But here's what I'm trying to come to. Is it possible that we live in a world today that is pervasive with factors that create for all of us a sense of homelessness? Technology does. I remember in the late 40s and 50s, when I was just a little kid, that there were people in our family that went to Detroit because they couldn't make it in East Tennessee. And it was interesting that there was always a lot of excitement, because every summer when they had vacation time, they didn't head for Florida or the Canadian Rockies. They headed for Athens, Tennessee and McMinn County because it was home. Technology had forced them out of their place, and they came back every chance they got. And most of them, when they retired, didn't stay in Detroit. They came home, and as they would say, to stay. And we see today with all this technological equipment that we don't know how to work. With all this technological equipment that they talk about coming, that we don't know whether we're going to be able to deal with it. And with all of this technological equipment that becomes so invasive of our lives, and we're not even sure it's invasive. When we hear people talking about artificial intelligence and robots, it makes us feel a sense of homelessness because we're not sure we want to live in that kind of a world, or that we'll fit and be able to survive in that kind of a world. We look at our planet. And regardless of how politically that we may feel, I think that all of us have a sense that our planet is being degraded by global warming. My brother just spent 16 days in Alaska. And he said the biggest encumbrance of their trip was all the clothing that they took. He spent 3 days in Anchorage 2 weeks ago, and it was the hottest 3 days in the history of Anchorage. It was over 92 degrees while he was there. He said that he went to a glacier field on an airplane, and they got out, and the glacier pilot that landed them on that glacier field said, below us there's 169 feet of solid blue ice. And one person in the group said, I guess we don't have to worry about global warming at all. And the glacier pilot said, last year there was 200 feet of blue ice. And we wonder when we see the carbon footprint on this planet. We wonder when we realize that everything that we as Americans could do to improve the kind of environmental nature of America is only 15% of the environmental impact of this world. And we know the way that other large nations are not worried about environmental impact. We wonder what a world would be like with a kind of a global warm raising of waters and changing of atmospheres. I drove to Asheville last week, and when you got beyond Newport and moved on over towards Waynesville, it was like the air was easier to breathe. Well, of course it was, because on that mountaintop it was surrounded by trees. And I think that we're made to feel a sense of homelessness by the way that our country has been turned into a killing field. A killing field that includes Walmarts, and we all know what happened yesterday in El Paso. But have you read the news this morning? Last night in Dayton, Ohio, 9 more people were killed and 16 in the hospital because of someone carrying a gun into a restaurant. And so the fact that we can't even go to Walmart, or the fact that we can't go to a restaurant, or the fact that we can't take our kids to a movie theater without feeling like somebody could walk in with a gun. In Texas, they have an open carry permit that extends to assault rifles. And we wonder, can we actually live in a world like that? And then for many of us, we feel a sense of homelessness born of aging, when our worlds become more limited and we can't get out like we once were able to. For many of us, we feel a sense of homelessness because of death. And we look around us almost any day, and the furniture of our lives that included many important people sitting in that furniture gets rearranged and rearranged and rearranged. Or we come into the world that we live in, and we feel sometimes a sense of a loss of simplicity. Everything becomes more complicated than it used to be, and sometimes we yearn for a world, a home, that is more simplistic. And so you see what I'm trying to say? We experience a pervasive homelessness that makes us wonder how we can fit in increasing ways, day after day after day. So what do we do? What do we do? And I believe that we take a lesson from these ancient Jews who were trapped in Babylon. They sang. There was a question in their minds, how do we sing the songs of the Lord in a strange land? But they sang anyway. Maybe for the same reasons that the slaves sang in the cotton fields back home. Maybe for the same reason that the concentration camps were punctuated by the sound of Jewish music. Maybe for the same reason that Woody Guthrie got most of his songs from dust bowlers and people that lived on the edges of life, and from Union strikers that were being beat. Maybe for the same reason that we have the blues. We sing anyway. So why do we sing anyway? Number one, because by golly, singing is an act of defiance. You can stand up and sing, then you are defying the world and the pressures that it puts upon you, if you can sing anyway. Number two, if you can sing, it makes you feel good. And there are even brain studies that suggest that the very intonations of the tone of singing massages the upper part of the roof of our mouths and gives our brain a massage that makes us feel pleasure and better. We sing because it makes us feel better to sing. Then I want you to think about this. And this is the strangest explanation. We might even sing because it's a way of giving even under difficult circumstances. That Bible says that the reason that those Jews even had the question, how can we sing the songs of God in a strange land, is because those Babylonians required them to sing. It's interesting. Jesus comes along later and teaches us that we have to love those people even who would mock and despise us. And you know, I have in the back of my mind that there was somebody over there in Babylon. And even though they were in the driver's seat of that culture, maybe they had their own needs. And even though they were the powerful and the elite, maybe they had their own needs. And maybe it was good for them. And maybe it somehow generated something of faith in their own lives to hear these Jewish people singing of their faith. Maybe singing was a way of giving even to those people that were humiliating them and capturing them and requiring of them. Do good to those that despitefully use you. Maybe singing allows us to do that. And even though I know that you sing in your showers, I haven't seen you there. Even though I know you sing when you're driving down the road by yourself, I have seen that. Even though you're singing sometimes maybe a little more than a joyful noise, a lot of times we sing together. And sometimes even at some of the most difficult and hurtful times of our lives, they were singing together as the Titanic went under the water. Maybe that togetherness allows us to deal with the homelessness that sometimes the world forces on us. I learned from my youth, and you did too, sing the wondrous songs of Jesus. Sing His mercy and His grace. In His mansions bright and blessed, He'll prepare for you a place. And then we sing sometimes with tears in our eyes when we all get to heaven. What a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all meet Jesus, we'll sing and shout the songs of victory. And that comes back to me sometimes. And I feel myself whistling that tune sometimes. And I find myself singing those words out loud to myself sometimes. My wife said not long ago, "Why have you been singing that song all week?" And maybe because it's an act of defiance in a world that makes us feel homeless. Maybe because it just makes us feel better, because it reminds us of home and youth and nostalgically of people that we love. Maybe because it can even maybe help those around us if they see us remaining somehow optimistic or positive. Or maybe sometimes because we can get wonderful people that lead us and play the music, and we can stand and we can sing it together. We are strangers in a strange land. A world of strange technology, a world of a degrading planet, a world in which people get killed at Walmarts, a world in which all kinds of things are going on that make us feel not at home. What do? We sing. And we defy. And we sing. And we feel better. And we sing in those ways that capture so much of our faith. Perhaps in doing so, give something to a world that feels more unlike home every day. I don't want to hasten my going home. I've got stuff I need to get done. I don't fear that home going like I once did. I bet you're the same way. I find things appealing about it. But while I'm here, and I hope that's a while, frankly, I got things to do. I got to sing. And my life's got to sing. And my faith's got to be expressed. And I've got to give in a way that relieves some of this terrible agony that we feel in this strange world. Go to your showers and sing. Get in your cars and sing. Go home and eat, Paul says. And it's more than the physical food. It's home cooking. Let us pray. Oh God, we pray with all of our hearts that you'll help those poor people in El Paso today and the horror that they've experienced. We especially pray for those people who still this morning don't know where their loved ones are and don't know if they're dead or alive. And we pray for those people in Dayton, Ohio, who simply went out last night to enjoy being around other people. We pray for our world in a way that it makes us feel very, very much like it's not our home. Oh God, help us that we might defiantly continue to live in joyful ways, understanding that in doing so we can maybe feel better, and we can maybe be a witness to others, and we can maybe reclaim the togetherness that comes when we unite our voices, especially in faith and love. God is our Father in the difficult world we live in, and help us that we might sing. For we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Sometime today you must go home and eat. Thank you for coming today.
Sing the